Hello, everyone. Good afternoon, good evening, wherever you happen to be in the world today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day to attend this latest bootcamp session. It's all focused on co-managed IT services, and this is actually the first of a two-part bootcamp series that's focused on co-managed. Today, we are going to be talking about the top co-managed programs that we're seeing MSPs take to market. So we'll go through how do you build them, what are the services that are included, how do you price them, what goes into that pricing. And then next week is going to be part 2, which is where we're going to get into, well, how do you promote and sell them? So if you don't have any co-managed clients today, how do you go about filling the funnel with co-managed opportunities? So I am not delivering this alone today. I have some friends, some colleagues that are joining me. If you're not familiar with who I am, my name is Stephanie Hammond. I am the head nerd here at Enable that's responsible for all things sales and marketing related. And I'm joined with, there's Eric. Eric Harless, he is our head nerd responsible for Cove data protection products. So he is our subject matter expert for all things Cove. So he's going to be talking about how can you use Cove and sell Cove in a co-managed model. And then Lewis Pope is our head security nerd, and he's going to be joining us as well to talk about our newest service that we've just launched at Enable, which is our Enable MDR service. And so he's going to talk about how can you use our Enable MDR service and build a co-managed program around that. So it is definitely a group effort today. So very happy to have you all here. So just a couple of housekeeping reminders before we get going. Everyone is on mute. That's just to maintain call quality. If you have any questions, as we're going through this, just throw them into the question panel and we will do our best to answer as many of them as we can. If for some reason we're not able to answer the questions live, we do commit to getting an answer back to you. It will likely be tomorrow because we have this boot camp this afternoon, but we do commit to getting an answer back to you. This session is being recorded because maybe if you did attend a previous session, we've made some changes to this one. So this session is being recorded. It will be cleaned up by marketing and then it'll be uploaded into Enable University to replace the one that's up there now. So if there is anyone on the line that just really needs to get a copy of today's recording, just let me know. I can send you the raw version, but if you can wait a couple of weeks, the good edited version will be added to the Enable you. All right. So looking at what we're going to be covering off today, it is an information-packed session. It's going to take a couple of hours to get through, but hopefully by the end, you know, if you're not doing anything around co-managed today, that you'll have the confidence that, you know, this is a potential market that you could pursue. So what are we going to talk about? First and foremost, I think it's important to kind of set a level set, kind of a baseline around what do we mean by the co-managed model? What do we mean by the co-managed approach to IT support? We're going to be talking about why this is the best time to move up market and embrace the co-managed IT support. We're going to be talking about why internal ITs would want to listen to you or maybe subscribe to one of your services. And we're going to be talking about the top go-to-market programs and pricing that we're seeing MSPs go to market with. So again, talking about those top programs, what do you include in them, how do you price them, and we have some resources to kind of help you deliver them as well. All right, so just before we start, just a quick poll that I want to launch, find out from everyone on the line today, are you delivering co-managed services today? Just a couple of options. Maybe yes, you have been and you have, you know, lots of customers on it and it's going well, or maybe you're just starting out, so you have a couple of customers, or maybe you're not doing it today, but you're thinking about it, or no, we don't plan to. So we'll just give a few seconds for everybody to cast their vote. All right. Well, that was quick. You guys were fast. Thank you. So it looks like, we'll just close that off. So we don't really have anybody that's robustly doing co-managed today, but 67%, so 2/3 of you on the line have just started it. You have a couple of clients, which is fantastic. And I love that 1/3 of you aren't doing it, but you're thinking about it. So I really do hope that out of today's presentation that we'll be able to give you some nuggets to really, help you really get started on this. And then for those that are just starting out, give us a sanity check. Is there anything that you're doing that we didn't talk about that maybe is working well for you? I would love for you to share that information so that we can get that incorporated into the presentation. Eric, you may want to shut off your camera. Awesome. Yeah, just to kind of keep the quality with your camera still running, if you can. Perfect. Thank you. So if you are, for the 67% that are just starting out and the 33% that are just thinking about it, we have a great resource that you can use to kind of help you. Everything that we're going to be talking about today, everything that I'm going to be talking about next week, you can find it within this co-managed digital playbook that Lewis, Eric, and I have written. I wanted to have it available for today. I just completed the third version of it, the third iteration, but I didn't get it back from content yet. So as soon as I get it back, because I updated it with all the MDR stuff that Lewis is going to be talking about, Eric made some updates as well from the backup section. So once I get this newest version back, I will send it out to everybody on the line today. If you have an old version of it, because maybe you attended a version of this in the past, then just delete that old version and start using this new version. And again, this whole, I think it's about 100 pages now. It's all really focused on how do you build, price, market, sell your co-managed offering so that you can go to market and have some good success. So stay tuned for that. All right, so when we look at the total target market for managed service providers, there's really two distinct audiences that can utilize their services. We have the traditional managed services market, typically supports organizations of 75 to 100 employees or less, but they don't have an internal IT department. And so your MSP effectively becomes their outsourced IT department. You're the one that's responsible for handling the ongoing security and management of their network. Then we kind of have the mid-enterprise, upper enterprise organizations, larger than 100 employees, and they do have an in-house internal IT department. And so it's that department that's really responsible for the management of the company's internal IT systems. Now, we all know the traditional managed services market has been around for about 20 years or so, but it's really been in probably the last 4 or 5 years where we're starting to see more and more MSPs move up market and really begin targeting those larger organizations, and they're having really good success. Because when you think about what the average spend is for the small and medium-sized businesses are allocating to technology, it's around $150 US per desktop per month. And that's, includes your hardware, your software, all your support services. But when you look at the average technology spend for, larger organizations, it's much higher. It's clocking in around $400 US per desktop per month. Because the mindset of these larger organizations are, if they need the help, they get the help they need, and they're generally willing to pay for that. So before we get further down the rabbit hole here, just really want to kind of do a level set, and what do we mean when we talk about the co-managed approach to IT services? So just for a definition, when we talk about co-managed services, we are talking about a non-threatening business arrangement where your MSP is partnering with an organization's internal IT department, and your goal is to really supplement and complement that internal IT skill sets. And your goal is to really help them maximize their overall technological efficiencies, and you're also helping them to better manage their HR costs. What this is not, the goal of co-managed, you're not going in there looking to replace the internal IT team. Your goal is not to get positions eliminated. You're not looking to get anybody fired. You're not going in there trying to angle to take control of everything within the network like you would within the traditional managed services model. With this approach, you're actually going in and you just want to help out with maybe one, maybe two pieces of the network where you've recognized that the internal IT team can use some help. So it really is all about establishing that partnership with the internal IT team and becoming a part of their team. Now, nothing can be said where, after a couple of years, maybe you have a great relationship going, maybe the natural fallout of that is some roles gets eliminated, some departments get replaced, but the goal of co-managed is really establishing that partnership, coming in and helping to augment and supplement an area where the internal IT may be lacking the skill sets, the tool sets, the knowledge gap, but your MSP can come in and can help with that. So I love it that, everybody on the line is either starting with the co-managed, they're thinking about it, but why does it make sense to really, move forward with it now? And I think the biggest reason is the market timing it's ideal. We are still experiencing this labor shortage. Organizations are still experiencing labor shortage. I know many MSPs are still experiencing labor shortage. So there's a recognition there that there is a shortage of qualified IT labor. And so this creates a real opportunity that your MSP can capitalize on. Also allows your MSP to kind of broaden your target market beyond the traditional outsourced managed services client, allows you to develop a new source of revenue stream for your MSP, because if you're not merging or if you're not thinking about acquiring other MSPs, you might be stuck as to how you can really grow your customer base or increase your revenues kind of within that traditional managed services model. But by shifting your focus and moving upstream into the mid-market, upper enterprise space, the co-managed model really provides that opportunity to allow you to attract and work with much larger customers than you might have been able to attract and work with previously under that traditional managed services model. And, with these larger customers comes bigger contracts, higher dollar values, and that can really help you kind of break through any revenue or growth plateaus that you might be experiencing. As a case in point, I was reading this report, it's a couple of months ago now, but it was a report that I read through the Channel E2E newsletter from ISG, and it was stating that while the managed services industry, it's solid, it's continuing to grow quarter over quarter, it actually found that the average contract value for the traditional managed services space has been declining, and they reported that it was actually down 18%. So if your average contract values are dropping, then this really means that MSPs have to go or should go out and find maybe a new customer type who will generate those larger contract values for them. And so moving up market, targeting, kind of these larger organizations in the mid and upper enterprise space with something like a co-managed type of solution, that could be a really good way to try and buck that trend. And in speaking to private equity investors, they've commented that they're now specifically looking for MSPs who are delivering co-managed services as potential acquisition targets because they recognize that it's those MSPs that have gone and secured longer agreements. They're the ones that have gone and were able to generate those higher contract values. And so these MSPs are considered highly valuable in the eyes of PE firms. And so these PE firms are buying these larger MSPs just because of the co-managed line of business that they have been able to develop. But what I think is a real big benefit and why it's a good time to go to market with co-managed is it can be a real differentiator for your MSP. Traditional managed services have been around for over 20 years. Co-managed, even though I've been talking about I feel co-managed for 20 years, has been around for maybe 4 or 5. So it's still a relatively new concept, I think, for managed service providers. And many MSPs, if they're delivering the service, they're not doing a great job promoting this service out in the market. And I know this because as part of my role as head sales and marketing nerd, I look at a lot of websites. I'm connected to quite a few MSPs on LinkedIn. And even when MSPs tell me that they offer co-managed services, a lot of times if I go and look at their website or I look at their social feeds, you would never know because there's not a mention of it anywhere on their webpage. So for the 67% that are saying that they've started co-managed, what does your online presence show? Can I go to your website? Can I go to your social feeds? Is it evident to me that you are targeting larger organizations? Maybe, maybe not a lot of the times. So even if your competitors are offering co-managed services, a lot of the times they're not doing such a great job promoting it. And we all know in this digital world that if you can't be found online, it's almost like it doesn't exist. So if you can now, the 33% that are thinking about it, if you can, go to market and actually build a strategy around, a marketing strategy around co-managed, you can actually probably leapfrog over a lot of your competitors and use this as a model to really help you stand out. And so that's what part 2 is going to be on, is how do you develop that go-to-market strategy for co-managed. So let's review just the top co-managed IT programs that we see MSPs take to market. I have broken them down into 3 different levels. These categories really depend on an MSP's own operational maturity level, their size, their skill level, but it also depends on the business risk sensitivities and the requirements of the internal IT team as well that you could be working with. So when we look at the entry-level service offerings there, I really categorize these as being the basics that any MSP should already be very familiar with delivering because they should already be doing this for all of their regular managed services clients. These activities tend to be tasks that internal IT personnel, maybe they find tedious, maybe they find it mundane. They obviously don't probably take any sort of enjoyment out of it. I never heard anybody say they love, when Patch Tuesday comes around. Is that maybe Lewis? I'm sure he likes Patch Tuesday. But, I look at these activities as being the ones that can be very time consuming to complete, or they might not, they might be overlooked and not be given a whole lot of attention to because a lot of other competing priorities that the team might be facing. So I really look at these entry-level offerings as being a fantastic kind of foot in the door type of offering that you can take to market because you're doing these already, right? So it wouldn't take that much effort to kind of bring those services to the same market or move them up market and offering them in the same way to an internal IT department. Then we look at the medium, mid-range service offerings. These are really services that tend to be more security focused. For those MSPs that might be already specializing in security, for their traditional managed services clients. And then we have the high-end services. And these are for larger MSPs that, may have an enterprise service desk already, that they're using with their enterprise service clients. So they could, kind of very naturally bring that up market as well. So we're going to go through 3 of them today. But when you're starting to launch, really the first key to success does lie with your RMM. Whether you are using Insight and Central, or maybe you're not an enabled partner of ours, which is great. Thank you for being here. So you have another RMM that you might be using, but whatever RMM you're using, that's at the core of your co-managed program. You want to make sure that you're automatically including the RMM monitoring and management as part of every program level that you decide to go to market with. Because in this case, your RMM, it acts as your data repository, not necessarily your remote monitoring and management platform. And the benefit of deploying your RMM agents is these RMM agents are going to be collecting data from your customer's environment. And that's data that you're going to be able to use to help uncover new sales opportunities. And that's going to really help drive your pipeline and hopefully expand your partnership value to your customers over time. Because if you're not including the RMM in your co-managed deal, I feel that you're kind of limiting your growth and you're limiting your expansion potential around what you could be selling to your internal IT customer. So, when you hear us talk about some of the most popular programs today, we're going to be talking about patch, we're going to be talking about backup, we're going to be talking about managed detection and response, aka MDR. You're going to see that we are including the RMM agent as part of each of those programs. The packages, start with your RMM and then grow from there, because you should always be thinking about potential future sales and ease of use and capabilities that you have or could have, not just kind of that immediate sale that's in front of you. So let's get into the top 3 programs that we're going to, or that we see MSPs take to market. The first one, or the number one that I would see, and I'd be curious for people on the line if they agree or disagree with me or not, is co-managed patch. And all of the partners that we talked to when I was building out this boot camp, they told me co-managed patch was the easiest program to start off with, because many organizations naturally struggle with patch. And several reasons why this is the most popular co-managed program that we see MSPs build and go to market with. And it really stems from the fact that internal IT departments, a lot of them, are overwhelmed. Actually, a study showed that 71% of IT and security professionals are finding or do find the task of patching very complex and time consuming. And it is taking up a large part, considerable part of their day. And the study found that they're spending, more than half of their time, 53% of their time each month, just detecting and prioritizing vulnerabilities, and 19% of their time testing patches. So it's leaving very little time to really get anything else done off of their very lengthy to-do list. But neglecting to perform patch management properly, we all know, opens the door to allowing the bad guys to get in. And 57% of cyber attack victims reported that their breaches could have actually been prevented just by installing an available patch. And the sad part is that a third of those victims actually knew of the vulnerability ahead of time, but they had just failed to take the corrective actions because of everything else that internal IT departments have to take care of. They just can't keep up with patch, and they can't manage it like they should or like they would. 74% of companies reported that they just can't patch fast enough because they just don't have enough staff. So things are getting missed. So definitely a great opportunity here for MSPs to reach out to these larger organizations, market themselves as patch specialists, and really offer to kind of take over the patch management responsibilities from that overburdened IT team, so that the staff can really refocus their efforts onto more meaningful work or critical projects that also need to get done. So when we define co-managed patch, what do we mean by this? It is a program where you as the MSP are providing centralized patch management service that allows for you to kind of take over complete responsibility of all the software updates, the bug fixes, the security holes, feature adds. You're taking that over from the internal IT team. Just want to clarify that this is not vulnerability management. This service that we're talking about today is really limited just to managing the software updates on approved assets. So there's several benefits that you can promote to your customer around this type of co-managed offering. Because when you look at the entire patch process and kind of what happens during that process, organizations have to be obviously continually monitoring to identify and discover vulnerabilities. They must continually be assessing and testing their patches, and then getting those approved patches deployed in a timely manner to their own systems. So, as we mentioned, this is a very time-consuming activity for a lot of internal IT departments, taking up, from our last survey, 50% or more of an IT professional's time. And then compounding this is another really large hurdle for internal IT admins, and that's, how can they find out when a patch is actually available? Because unless there's something like a Patch Tuesday with Microsoft, in a lot of cases, there's no real system in place for that. If we use kind of Chrome as an example, Chrome releases a full OS update about once a month. Minor updates like security fixes, software updates, they're happening every couple of weeks. So just for patching something like Google Chrome, an IT admin has to go through the patch cycle, 2 or 3 times a month just to keep Google Chrome up to date. But what about all the other applications that are out there in the organization that the employees are using? One study found that a company is using or could potentially use up to 110 different applications just within their business. So you can imagine how difficult it could be for an internal IT admin to ensure that every application within their organization that the employees are using is properly patched to prevent the company from experiencing a breach. And unless it's someone's full-time job and they're working on nothing else, yeah, it might be possible to keep up. But a lot of organizations where internal IT staff might be limited, they're dealing with multiple priorities, something has to give, right? And oftentimes it's activities like patch that kind of gets pushed to the side. So just by taking this simple example with Chrome into perspective, there's some really good benefits that you can speak to when you're promoting a program like this out in the marketplace. Your co-managed patch program effectively offloads a very critical but generally unpopular function to your MSP. And this can really allow the internal IT team to refocus their efforts on more strategic and, obviously more enjoyable activities than dealing with patch every day. It also helps to mitigate an organization's security risk, because by partnering with your MSP, it's going to be your MSP that's going to provide that dedicated focus on patch management and the software updates that might not be taking place today, because it's going to be your job to ensure that the company's network assets don't become susceptible to exploitation and become breached. It can also help the organization, because they have this now dedicated focus to patch, maintain compliance, because patching is a compliance, part of the compliance standards. So you can help them maintain compliance and avoid unnecessary fines. And it's just good cyber hygiene maintenance, right? It's just good organizational preventative maintenance, because doing your patch management, it's going to really help keep the organization's computers, their networks running smoothly and reliably. So when we look at the services that are included in as part of the co-managed patch program, I have them listed out here. It's all contained in the co-managed playbook as well, that I'll get to as soon as I get it from legal and marketing. But this is stuff, again, that you're doing already. You're already fully probably aware of this list, and because you're doing this with your traditional managed services clients. But quickly going through it, the MSP is going to manage all the software patching on behalf of the internal IT team. You're going to be taking care of the patching, the upgrading the software, so that you're removing security holes, bug fixes, adding in any new feature updates if you decide to include that as part of the program. You are also going to be developing and maintaining an up-to-date inventory of all the assets, the operating systems, the applications that exist in the customer's environment that are going to be getting patched, that are going to be underneath your purview and your patching responsibility. And you're going to want to make sure that you're reviewing this inventory with the internal IT admin, whoever is leading the charge there, on a regular basis, so that nothing gets missed. You are obviously going to be scanning on a regular basis for available patches. And then you are going to be using your lab environment so that you can first test those available patches to your representative sample of assets in that lab environment, so you can stress test the machines to make sure that the patches are not going to cause issues when they eventually get pushed out to the customer's production environment. And then once the patch has been tested within that small sample of assets, that's when you're going to go then and install the approved patch to those assets that are under your care, and you're going to validate to confirm that they have been installed correctly. And then if necessary, when necessary, you're going to provide that tier 1 troubleshooting or support that if you have to remediate any system or any asset that might have a missing or a failed patch. So, any issues with the patch taking effect, it is going to take time to investigate. It's going to take time to troubleshoot why the patch is failing. We have built that time into the overall program cost, which we're going to review momentarily. If your MSP cannot remediate that issue remotely, maybe because it's of some environmental issue, that's when it does get escalated back to the internal IT team and you get them to take care of it. So within our pricing structure, we haven't built in anything like second tier, second level support in the monthly price. If this is something that you want to offer, or you negotiate with the internal IT department that they would like you to do the secondary troubleshooting or the second level support, you can either build it in or it just becomes an add-on. Maybe you charge a time material rate for it. Maybe you sell them a block of hours and then you just pull the time off of that block of hours. You also could decide whether you want to include feature functionality updates so that you're making sure that the organization is running the most up-to-date feature set for all of their line of business software that they might be offering as well. So that could be an option, or it could be out of scope depending. But then lastly, you are going to want to document the patches, document the test results, the deployments, and this has become something that you do review with the internal IT person on that monthly basis. And it's these monthly meetings, and you're going to hear from when Eric talks and when Lewis talks, every program has this monthly cadence or a quarterly cadence, depending on how often you want to meet with them or feel you need to meet with them. But you're going to have this regular meeting cadence with the internal IT department or administrator, because this is where you provide your value. You want to be transparent. You want to be accountable. To really keep them in the loop, because you never want them to feel like you're running ruckshaw over them and you're taking over, because this is a partnership here. And ideally, you do want to grow that partnership. So you're going to want to have these regular meetings so that everybody's is kept in the loop in terms of what is happening. And so when we get to the pricing, which is coming up next, you'll see that we've built in time for that type of activity. So talking about pricing, when we look into how our MSPs pricing their co-managed services out in the marketplace, there's a screenshot here, comes from our costing calculator that we've developed. I know it's probably not the easiest thing to see depending on what device you're listening to us and watching us on. I go into great detail on how to use the costing calculator within my pricing bootcamp that I just delivered a couple of weeks ago on how do you build, price, market, sell security programs. So if you didn't attend that bootcamp or you don't have a copy of this pricing calculator, just put calculator in the question panel and I will be sure to get a copy of it over to you. And I'll also send you a copy of the recording so that you can understand everything that goes into how we priced this out, because I'm not going to go into huge detail in this today. But for everyone that is, maybe overseas or outside of the US, all of the pricing that you're seeing here is in USD dollars, but within the calculator, you can toggle to change so it's your currency. But I do more want to focus on the pricing theory that was used so that you can really use that theory to help set prices in your own market. But one of the biggest points that I do want to make when you see any of the pricing, when Eric talks about it and Lewis talks about it, is you want to aim for gross contract margins anywhere between 40 and 60%. And you will see that we tried to meet that target because that's what MSPs told us that their goals were. Anywhere between 40 to 60% gross margin on the program was ideal for them. You also see that when we looked at the pricing, our fully burdened labor rate was $50 US per hour. Again, if your labor rate for the average engineer that's going to be delivering this program is a little bit different, that could impact the pricing as well. But when it comes to setting your price, it really is quite simple. It's a compilation of your software costs, your labor costs, which is based on your fully burdened labor rate, and then whatever gross margin percentage you decide to build into your program. And again, you'll see that for most part, we try to keep it between that 50 and 60% range. So when we look at the monthly pricing for co-managed patch, you're going to see that server pricing, suggested pricing around $75 per server per month US, gross margin of around 41.5%, desktop pricing around $12 US per desktop per month, gives us a gross margin of almost 54%. And the nice thing is that I did, this is what other MSPs told me, but I delivered this at Exchange last year to a couple of different boardroom sessions. And it was lovely to see several MSPs that were doing co-managed actually raise their hand and actually said, yeah, that's very much in line with what we charge, $75 a server, $12 a desktop. Actually, I think the range was 70 to 85, I was told, and probably 12 to 15 dollars per desktop. So very much in line with our research, our conversations, and then going out into the wild and talking to MSPs at Exchange. And the gross margins actually get better as you get going, especially once you've been able to baseline and configure your customer's environment. We actually have a super elite partner. They sell their co-managed patch program to the tune of 10,000 to 30,000 devices at a time. They deal with larger hospitals who primarily have IT generalists on staff who don't really have the time to properly conduct their patch management activities. So they're very keen to outsource this to this MSP. So they have one hospital customer and they took on the patching for 30,000 of their devices. And they actually are selling their patch services for $60 a server US and $8 a desktop US. And even at those price points, their gross margins are much higher than what I'm showing here. I think they told me that they're getting, north of 80%. And it's only because they've been doing it for a long time and they have their patch processes very finely tuned. But really the goal or the idea behind this is that these margins are doable because of the amount of automation that you can get out of your RMM. The majority of the work is done by the system, not done manually. So the manual work is actually quite minimal. Now, when we look at what goes into this pricing, we are including the cost of the RMM agent. This is just our regular and central Insight MSRP pricing on US dollars. But if you are using another RMM, just insert your agent cost there. Also building in the time and the labor to monitor and proactively manage the patch management function. So this is including the time to kind of follow through on a lot of those items that were listed out in the previous slide, like the testing of the patches, the validating of the patches, making sure they're successfully installed. If we have to make any tweaks to the approval or reboot process, potentially, that time is also incorporated in. We've also included the time and the cost for tier 1 or level 1 troubleshooting and intervention. If you need to jump in and remediate any system or maybe any asset that is alerted to you where there's a patch missing or a patch failed to be applied. So this includes time for you to try and reapply any of those problem patches. And most importantly, it does include the time for those monthly review meetings with the internal IT department. It is critical that you are setting up a cadence, whether it's monthly, whether it's quarterly, that you are meeting with them to make sure everything is in the loop. Because especially with anything on the co-managed, you don't want there to be assumptions made where the internal IT thinks that you're doing it and you think the internal IT is doing it. We don't want anything to fall through the cracks. We don't want this, right? So we want to make sure that we're regularly sitting down, meeting with the team to make sure that everybody is well aware of their role and their responsibility so that nothing is missed. Looking at some of the out of scope items, again, any patches, any updates that might require some on-site manual intervention, typically not included in the monthly fee. If this is something that needs to be done and you can't fix it remotely, generally, you're escalating it to the internal IT team, let them take care of it. If they need to reimage a machine, they can take care of it. Or if they want you to do it, then that's typically billable you send them a bill for that, or again, pull it off a block of time if you sold them a block. Also, any work that might need to be done to kind of standardize the software, or if you feel that you need to standardize the software versions, because there's a bunch of different versions out there on the network, that is typically out of scope as well. It's typically part of an onboarding project and is charged an additional fee. Although we are going to be giving you some recommended pricing, that MSPs have told us, there's a lot of different caveats and a lot of different variables that could impact that pricing that we want to make you aware of. When it comes to patch, the number of locations, the number of patching schedules, the number of domains, the number of different versions of Windows that have to be patched, all could impact your pricing. And if you're going and if you're having that initial onboarding and you're having your conversation with the IT manager and he wants to expand your scope of work and expand the responsibilities over what we've kind of outlined in the services slide, that may also impact your pricing, and you may need to charge more for that. So that's why it's really beneficial to go through, get the costing calculator, or if you have your own version, and run the costing through just to make sure that you're charging appropriately for that. Also, a key lesson that MSPs told me as they were going to market with this is, initially, if you're just starting out, stay away from multi-year deals in the beginning, because it's important to really track your labor that you're spending. Because if you go right out of the gate and start offering 3-year contracts, and then you just have figured out that you've underestimated your costs, or the labor component of it, you don't want to be stuck in that underperforming contract for multiple years. So many MSPs told me that, stick to maybe a 12-month contract in the beginning, really work to fine-tune your processes, really work to get your costs in order. And then once you kind of have a good handle on that, then absolutely it might be beneficial to go and try and sell those multi-year deals after that. Couple of other assumptions, caveats around the pricing recommendations. Again, as I mentioned, the monthly price doesn't include setup and onboarding. A lot of MSPs do charge an additional fee for this, and it really depends on the size of the customer, the number of locations, the environment to be patched. Also, that onboarding activity will include things like setting up all your monitoring policies, getting the agents installed, getting the patch schedule set up in place. So that's all part of that onboarding fee. As mentioned, it also doesn't include any upfront project work that needs to be done around standardization of Windows software versions. Or maybe you recognize that some assets need to be consolidated before the monthly contract actually needs to start. Or maybe there's some major version upgrades to maybe some of their line of business software that needs to be done ahead of time. Or, during the course of the contract, you may decide that this is an additional expense and pull that out, keep that separate. But again, something to think about there. Also, there was the assumption that was made from the labor component that your patch automation with whatever RMM that you're using, that you're solid with it, that it is set up correctly. We're assuming a 95% automation success rate here. So the idea is that you're really only going to be dealing with the problematic machines. So if you're, if you know that you can't hit a 95% automation success rate, if you're looking to improve that, we have a lot of resources that can help you with that. Head nerds, not me, but my other 6 colleagues that are very technical. There's a lot of different boot camps that we offer on patch, whether you're using RMM or Insight, or whether you're using N-Central. So if your team could use some refresher training on how to really lock down patch and how it works, or maybe you're using older features because maybe you're on an older version, and then it might make a good idea to maybe take some of those boot camps to get that refresher training. They're all available online within Enable U, so you can download and then listen to them at your leisure. We also have statements of work. If you're looking for them for co-managed patch, they're going to be contained within that co-managed digital playbook. You probably already have statements of work already for your traditional managed services clients, but we've developed these as well if maybe documentation isn't your strong point. Also, Lewis has made available this really handy NIST enterprise patching guide that really works to explain, how you can best patch upper enterprise accounts. It talks about some of the recommended security practices as it relates to patch management. And it's a fantastic resource that Lewis really recommends every MSP download and read through, because especially if you're going to market with something like co-managed patch and you're dealing with these, larger organizations, if you've always done patch the way you've always done patch, then you might be missing out on some key activities and some key processes that are now being recommended to properly mitigate and protect your customer systems. So Lewis has provided a QR code there that I've included on the slide. Really encourage you to download that and take a read through if that is something that you think might help. All right, so that concludes kind of, program number one. I think we'll take maybe just a quick 5-minute break before we get into Eric's section on backup and then Lewis's section on our new managed detection response, just to kind of, get a drink of water, refresh your coffee, stretch your legs. So I have it as 1:46 p.m. Eastern time. So let's just take a 5-minute break and then we'll come back and continue. All right, thanks everyone. All right, so hopefully everyone had an opportunity to stretch your legs, get a new coffee. So I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Eric. He is our head nerd, as I mentioned, responsible for all things Cove data protection related. And he's going to take you through a couple of different options on how you can leverage and sell Cove in the co-managed way. Thanks, Eric.
Thanks, Steph. Appreciate that. Big shout out, big thank you for all the work you've put in on this particular bootcamp, Steph. Lewis and I are here just kind of helping to kind of prop up a little bit some of the extra pieces. You've done a lot of the legwork, a lot of the hard work here, and without that, we would not have a comprehensive solution here. So, just like Steph had outlined with patch, backup management or data protection, now under the Cove brand, is another great opportunity for co-managed services. We're going to look at how that relates, how you would price it, package it, configure what's inbounds, what's out of bounds. We're going to start by talking about servers and workstations, but as you know, we've also got M365 protection as well. We'll cover that in the last third of the session, okay? So what is co-managed backup or co-managed data protection? It's going to be a bit different depending on your customers and your environments. So we're going to give you some guidance, but please take that with a grain of salt, adjust it, tweak it, make it appropriate to the skill set that your organization, that your staff have, and the services you really, really want to provide. So at a base, we're talking about providing recurring offsite data protection for servers and workstations. That should include monitoring, periodic testing, error resolution, remediation, some level of reporting, probably on a monthly basis, and recovery assistance. Now, when I say recovery assistance, that's different than testing. Testing your backups are how you prove that what you're doing is recoverable and successful. Recovery assistance, what you're going to be doing when the customer actually needs you to help them get data back from a data loss. So one is understanding how to walk the walk and talk the talk. The other one is actually going through those procedures. And you don't want to find yourself in a situation where the customer's calling and you've not tested that procedure. You don't know what to do next. That's what they're paying you for, to be the expert in the room. Now, I'll occasionally get asked when talking about this or other backup services, what about monitoring legacy on-premise backup applications, maybe a net backup, a backup exec, an Arcstrip, a storage craft, something like that. Maybe it's disk, maybe it's tape-based. Now, that opens up a lot of complexities around licensing, access to the software, how would you monitor it separately, where do the tapes go, things like that. And while you could bring that into a co-managed service as well, it's outside of the scope of what we're talking about today. We're going to try to focus on just the Cove data protection offering. It's going to be a lot simpler for your technicians to standardize on a service here versus managing legacy-based systems that maybe they need to restore from only once in a blue moon, or they're only holding on to for compliance reasons. If we look at it from the standpoint of customer benefits, just like with Patch, what we're doing here is we're transferring that day-to-day responsibility of those repetitive tasks, the things that the IT organization just can't get to, over to your organization, so that you've got a small staff of people who are experts in a particular field, and they know how to resolve that VSS error or that open file issue error, or various other items from a backup perspective, or more importantly, they understand how to do the disaster recovery, which isn't going to happen very frequently, but when it does, you need it to go down without a hitch. So we're going to mitigate the organization's security risks as well by offering managed backup. And what I'm saying here is that the likelihood of the customer being able to get back up and running increases by having an expert in their corner that's dealing with backups on a day-to-day basis, that they're monitoring, managing, making sure they're successful. It's going to increase the likelihood of a successful recovery. Malware, bad actors, when they get on your network, one of the first things they're going to try to do, besides lateral movement, is to find your backups. They want to damage, they want to delete, they want to purge your VSS snapshots, they want to do everything that they can before they ransom the systems, so that you don't have a way to get the data back. And that's where having something like Cove, a cloud-based data protection solution, allows you to get that risk, get the data off-site, mitigate the attack surface at the customer's location. It's going to help the organization meet compliance with regional, industry, or insurance recovery requirements. So maybe there's a cyber insurance policy. Maybe you are working with state and local government, or medical. All of those different type of customers are going to have different pieces of legislation or industry requirements for their data protection. If you are specializing in that segment, you're going to understand that possibly better than they do, how data needs to be protected, how it's going to need to be retained, and where it needs to be stored. By using data protection in a managed service, you're ensuring consistency of protection across those internal IT systems, whether it be line of business or workstations, laptops. Maybe now, post-pandemic, we're dealing with users working from a home office or a remote location. Regardless of that, having a centralized remote view where you're not walking from machine to machine with USB drive installing software helps ensure that you've got consistent levels of protection, consistent levels of monitoring, coverage, and testing. And then finally, you can reduce costs here as well. Giving them a cloud-based solution doesn't require any type of on-premise hardware. Something you can deploy remotely across dozens, hundreds, or even thousands of machines, in the course of a weekend. No additional hardware investments required. You don't have to roll a technician in order to stand up a backup server or swap out a NAS. So the services included, and obviously this is what we've envisioned in a backup management or data protection co-managed service. You can add or subtract these as needed, once again, based on the skill set inside of your organization. You'll want to adjust the pricing. We'll talk about that here momentarily, also based on the services you choose to include or exclude. Some of the key services here really, they're kind of no-brainers to a certain extent. Some of these we're going to do for you automatically. I think, as Steph said, this also on the Patch side. A lot of this happens automatically through the tool, through the platform. And you're knowing how to manage and work with this platform is going to be key, but it does a lot of it for you. So set it and forget it is really your friend here. What you're going to do through Cove is offer or provide secure backup access to and management of the encryption keys for all of the protected devices. Those encryption keys are very important. Those are the keys to the kingdom when it comes time to recovery. With those, the IT staff could do restores. With those, a bad actor could do restores. You want to protect those encryption keys just like you would credentials to log into your domain controller. As the MSP, you are going to be regularly monitoring for and remediating against failed backups, unsuccessful backup operations. Maybe it's an open file, a failed VSS writer, a disk I/O error, or somebody turned on BitLocker on an external USB drive and you need to get a password in there. So some of them are more active than others, but on these approved devices, we've been managing and monitoring and help to resolve those issues, sometimes through remote control software on the machines, sometimes by getting the IT staff involved and having them take action. This is going to be the core driver for moving to a code managed service for a lot of organizations, because they're going to rely on your expertise. You're dealing with this on a day-to-day basis, and you're going to know how to resolve those issues a lot quicker, a lot faster than somebody that only does backup as a part-time job inside of the IT organization. As an MSP, you're going to ensure the backup software is regularly updated and patched. That's super easy with code because we do that for you automatically. As we do our monthly releases, we post them, make them available for download, then we roll out 2 to 3 weeks later with a auto update to the backup agent, constantly updating the cloud service, the M365 agents, our recovery environments as well. Providing monthly backup reports for all of the various protected devices. Anyone's paying for the service like this is going to want to know that their backups are successful. They want to see what you've been doing. They want to see the error messages that you're resolving and working on. So if you're dropping into a ticketing system, that's great, but giving them some type of end-of-month executive summary report of the successes and failures is going to help ensure that when disaster does strike, it's not a matter of if, but when, that they can see that you've been managing the backups successfully, you've got the recovery test reports, and you're showing that ongoing compliance level of protection. The MSP staff is also going to be there to assist with file and folder, application level, database level restores. Now, while you might want to, or might think you want to allow access to the techs at the code managed environment, you may want to think about that a little bit longer. Maybe you want to slowly allow that. While it is certainly possible for you to divide access and responsibilities amongst the on-premise staff, so they can do self-service restore or get in and do some troubleshooting and some monitoring, it could also complicate things if you're not working very closely on who's going to take or own certain responsibilities versus others. So probably start out a little bit more tightly managed and slowly expand functionality out into that organization, all the way down to the actual end users on the laptops and the desktops to do their own restores, possibly from our documents licensing. In addition to that, though, you're going to be assisting the IT staff with bare metal recoveries and virtual disaster recoveries to compatible repaired or replacement hardware or hypervisors as required. And I say compatible and repaired or replacement here very loosely. In this particular space, you're not really responsible for the recovery environment. They're going to need to have replacement laptops, replacement servers, probably managing the warranties around that Dell RAID controller that needs to be swapped out, those hard drives that need to be swapped out. Where you would come into play would be once that hardware has been repaired and replaced, helping to facilitate and trigger that restore and get it back up and running, but once again, not managing or controlling the hardware layer underneath. If they're looking for you to do that level also, you're kind of stepping out of code managed into really fully managed type of environments there. Periodic recovery testing. This is something that not enough folks are doing, although it's that unwritten rule around backup and recovery is test your backups. You used to do that by dropping a tape in and restoring some files. Today you do that through disaster recovery testing. You virtualize a full image, bring up a bootable machine, take a screenshot, email it out to the customer, send it to the insurance providers as that proof of life that this machine is able to be restored from a given point in time. We do that automatically without any additional hands-on operation. So it's something you can tick the box with, pass that straight on to your partners. Now, if they're looking for more levels, more in-depth disaster recovery testing, that's something we can talk about later as we expand out that statement of work. So the question is, what can you charge for a managed backup environment or a co-managed backup environment. We've taken a couple passes at this, and Steph and I went back and forth a little bit here or there, trying to get to what we think are some good margins and not going to break the bank. But you're going to want to adjust this a little bit based on your region, your currency, what the guy down the street is charging for comparable services, either co-managed or fully managed, and think about what you're delivering versus what they're delivering with their services. Okay. There's really 4 key areas that or options that you could sell. It would be a documents-based backup option that's designed for low-end workstations, rank and file employees, where you just want to capture 99 different business file extensions off of the laptops and the workstations. It'll find it anywhere on the machine. That's your Word documents, your PowerPoints, your Excels, your PDFs, your text files, your PSTs, your QBB backups from your QuickBooks, things like that, but not your JPEGs, not your MP3s, not your videos, your movies, none of those items. Something like that typically has got a cost on it, at least US dollars, around $1, $1.10 per license, or might even be bundled into some of your base price points in some of the different licensing plans. Full desktop options, that kind of product, something you could charge, upward of $35 a desktop and still see about a 35-36% gross margin. So coming in between the $10 and $12 a workstation, your cost perspective on those licensing. Once again, we're talking based on full list price here, US dollars. Your mileage may vary depending on quantities, commitments, and region. Okay. Server offerings, we offer server licenses both as physical or virtual, and they're going to have a different price point on them. We feel that you can very easily charge $100 a server per month in a co-managed environment. Going to give you anywhere from 40 to 60 or so percent gross margin on that server protection. All of these are going to come with pooled fair use models and allow you to provide full disaster recovery ready protection for your customers. There are a list of features or a list of services built into these costs that we're making assumptions on. If you were to strike out any of those, you might want to look at it from the standpoint of possibly lowering your cost, but also possibly lowering the price you're going to charge to your clients. And this is one of the most common questions we get is, how much can I charge for a server backup or a workstation backup? And depending on your environment and the customer you're working with, they've got a much higher ratio of workstations to servers, or a very, very small number of workstations, but a lot of servers. You may want to adjust these prices a little bit to ensure you're getting a good overall average gross margin across the base. This is going to include not only the cost of the Cove licenses, but also the cost of the RMM license, so that you've got the ability to do remote deployment through automation policy, run scripting or run monitoring, remote control, remote access, so you can get in and do that remediation when needed. This does include the recovery testing that's fully automated. It's going to take those Windows servers, Windows workstations, boot those up in the enabled cloud, screenshot them, and deliver those successes or failure based emails either to you or to your co-managed partner. It's going to take into account the time and materials needed to monitor and manage the backup processes, tier 1 level troubleshooting, periodic remediation and recovery assistance as needed. And you may want to think about how much remediation or how much recovery assistance, if they've been by 1 ransomware a month, or 2 ransomwares a month, or 3 ransomwares a month, maybe you need some additional training or some additional security in place as well. But you may want to set some caps on the top end there, so that you do have billable events or things that are outside of scope from a statement of work perspective. Finally, monthly reviews. This is you looking at the end of the month. What was the success? What was the failure? Generating the reports to show what you've done for the environment and any recommendations that are needed that they would take care of on their end. What's out of scope? Unsupported or legacy hardware and legacy operating systems, unmanaged devices, bring your own devices, things like that. You've got employees using their own laptops, their own workstations because they're working from home, providing backup operations or remote monitoring and management for those, or even securing and patching those, probably out of scope here from a co-managed environment. You don't want to get into a situation where you're dealing with hardware that is out of warranty or not owned by the corporate entity that you're supporting. Recovery and remediation services for virus, ransomware that's occurring on obsolete or unsupported hardware. Hey, if it's hit and you had a backup of it, or they had a backup of it, and they need your assistance, then that's project work, that's task work, that's outside of the scope of what we've committed here. While you might want to help with those type of things, you may want to farm that out, or you might want to say, no, that's outside of the scope of what we're doing. Unix, mainframe-based platforms. Cove does support Mac, Windows, and Linux based platforms, but Unix mainframe would be out of scope. In addition, recovery to data center environments, colos or cloud compute environments where there's continuity costs or compute and or disk storage, bandwidth costs, those kind of things. Those would be outside of scope unless those were infrastructures provided or owned or managed by your IT partner. Once again, we want to keep those costs and that management outside or out from underneath your purview and your umbrella. Next slide, please, Steph. Thank you. So some considerations on that pricing. Once again, everybody's environment is going to be just a little bit different. No customers are exactly alike. So if there's more servers or more workstations in an environment, or they're more concerned about recoverability of certain key applications on certain systems versus all of the servers, things like that, you can adjust your backup schedules, your recovery frequencies. We can think about other options around disaster recovery and standby servers. If there's more Mac or more Linux in an environment than you would be typically comfortable with, you may want to up your prices or adjust your price points across the board, maybe normalize those across all of the workstations so that it balances out. Nice, quick, easy price point per system versus separate price points on the Linux versus the Mac systems. If you've got environments where there's a large amount of data on select servers, so you've got the average 500 gig server, then you've got a couple that are in the 15 to 20 terabyte range. You might also want to think about normalizing or raising your prices across the board and coming up with an average per server in order to accommodate for those extra large systems. Take into account, though, large systems mean more data to back up. It means more data to restore. It's going to require more bandwidth in both situations. So knowing what the average gigabyte per device is and the available bandwidth upload and download at the client can play to this pricing as well, especially when you look at trying to guarantee or get to a service level objective around recovery. Advanced reporting needs, anything above and beyond that monthly report of operations that have been performed and health or status of the machines, maybe the email with the screenshots. You may want to take that into account if it's going to take you significant time above what's been allotted in the calculation to build out that reporting. If you've got to do seeding to upload the data or reverse seeding in order to download the data before you can trigger or restore, take that into account as well. Any other aggressive recovery point objective or recovery time objective needs above and beyond, what we've kind of lumped or mapped out here for you could definitely impact your price point. They want a standby server. They want data residing in Azure. They can spin up at a moment's notice. I'm going to recommend you utilize your customers' Azure infrastructure, their own credentials, tied to their own billing and their own credit card, not getting yourself situated between your customers and Microsoft invoicing. You don't want to be that middleman. Charge for the service, but let them pay for or manage the infrastructure. And then finally, the depth of the recovery testing. If they really actually want to get involved in the recovery testing, they want to periodically spin something up and actually work on that hardware in a mock failover situation, all of that would be outside of scope. Basic recovery testing is what we're talking about built into the solution, which would be the automated boot, screenshot deliverables, list of services that are running, things like that. Some optional services, things we can expand upon. Like I said, if it were a limited bandwidth environment or you had different upload versus download speeds, you might consider utilizing a local speed vault. This would be a optional secure local backup and restore cache to a compatible NAS device or network share. Ideally, it's going to be a network share, a NAS, or a server that the customer already owns. You once again don't want to be getting into the market here of selling hardware, leasing hardware for them for this service. You're just there to help manage it. While you could make recommendations, on the Synology or the Buffalo NAS or what have you, I recommend staying away from the actual ownership or the leasing of the hardware. MSPs could optionally provide the customer IT staff with access to monitor data protection, so read-only level access into the backup management console to see what's going on from a backup perspective, to maybe help mitigate some of the need for monthly reports, since they can look at it and monitor it themselves. They can also expand that out to allow IT staff and end users the ability to perform self-service restores. But I do suggest going into that slowly. Make sure it's really something that they will use and they want to use, not just opening that up. The more people that have access to the environment, the more people that can damage or adjust or change, and then of course causing you more work to manage and monitor. The MSP can optionally design or consult on or offer other local or remote managed continuity services especially for those business critical systems, a lot of business applications, owners, managers, C-levels within an organization. Anybody can hire, fire, or adjust contracts. You may want to treat their laptops and workstations more like servers in line of business apps than say just rank and file laptops. And then finally, the MSP can optionally choose to manage or monitor those legacy third-party backups or those local backup solutions. Once again, set out of scope for this configuration, but don't walk away from that. If there's a significant revenue opportunity there and it's not going to cause too much drain and you've got the expertise in-house, just don't let branching out and covering a dozen different backup solutions take you away from the core benefit here of the benefit of scale in managing Cove, centrally managing Cove and deploying and working with Cove. Some assumptions, some caveats. The price points that we gave you there are based on just monthly fees that you can charge your customer. We're not taking into account any real initial consulting time to understand their SLAs and recovery time objectives and key servers, key resources, key applications. And while it's great to set that expectation with them up front of who's going to do what and when, we think of that mainly as free consulting work in order to get the business. You want to build that time into your price point over that first year, and then possibly think about keeping it flat the second year versus increasing it, but probably not dropping or decreasing as you move forward. If there is a significantly large investment for some of those extra items, you might want to consider some upfront onboarding fees, although the majority of the deployment can be done through automation policies and simple scripting. You're not going to be sending technicians out on site to install backup servers like you would with competitive products like Veeam or a backup exec. So in this kind of scenario, fairly easy, fairly low risk to ignore that initial upfront setup fee. Not saying that you don't have to do it or can't do it, but we've kind of stayed away from it. Where a local speed vault, where that local NAS might be used, we recommend the MSP is to not be selling it or leasing it to the customer. We would suggest that the customer would source that themselves. If you are going to provide that hardware, sell them that hardware, lease it to them, obviously drop those costs into your monthly fees, amortize that over a short period of time so they're not paying for it, so that you're not stuck with hardware if they back away from the service after 6 months or 9 months or a year, okay? For labor components, we assume that your backup software is set up to run correctly. We're assuming you're getting an average 95% success rate on your backups on average. It could be higher some months, could be lower some other months. And that's going to come at just economy of scale. Once again, as your technicians learn Cove and start to deploy that across multiple customers in a co-managed environment, you're going to be able to see that 95% success rate across your infrastructure, maybe not just necessarily one customer, but at least across the infrastructure, and learn how to wean out those problem items, problem devices. From a resource perspective, implementation, getting started, understanding how to go about the day-to-day management and monitoring and configuration. There's a lot of different tools out there for you. We've provided a statement of work for you on the server and workstation side, as well as on the M365 side, which we'll talk about next. QR codes here for those various training resources. I do a series of boot camps in addition to the online Getting Started series. Level 100, level 200 nerd boot camps. We do some advanced monitoring. We've got a new one coming out for advanced troubleshooting. Data recovery boot camps taking you through virtual disaster recovery, bare metal recovery, our standby image and one-time restore based recovery into Azure, VMware, and Hyper-V. and then for the advanced user, even API level boot camps, so that you can learn how to utilize and do things that maybe the software wasn't designed for out of the box. Okay. Take that entire thing we just talked about and just turn it up on its end. We were looking at server-based backup and workstation-based backup, but not everybody needs workstation-based backup. So let me give you an alternative here. Not everybody needs backup of their local Exchange server, the local SharePoint server. Once again, turn it on its ear and give you a SaaS-based backup solution. Now, when we do that, that's great. It's SaaS. You don't have any on-premise infrastructure. You don't have as much of the risks, as much of the cost. It's all operational expense, not capital expenditures. And in that kind of scenario, you would think that an organization is going to be happy. Well, over 40% of SaaS users say they've lost data. According to this rewind survey I've got linked here. In addition to that, when you look at next slide, please, Steph. When you look at reports from Gartner, they're saying that 70% of organizations are likely to suffer business disruption due to unrecoverable data loss in a SaaS-based application. M365 being, once again, a SaaS-based application. You might think that Microsoft's backing up your environment for you. Well, really, Microsoft's being paid to provide availability and some recycle bin, some undelete capabilities for the data, but they're really not ensuring data integrity. They're not blocking data corruption, even though they have started to branch out into M365 native backup by offering APIs out to the various backup vendors. They're still doing this inside of their own Microsoft cloud, so it's not distributed. It's not the 3-2-1 backup model where you've got it on multiple media across multiple locations. What Microsoft is doing is they're providing availability, not data protection. So as an MSP, what you would be offering for your customers that are taking advantage of Microsoft 365 is a managed cloud-based backup of a cloud-based SaaS solution. That's going to be the user mailboxes, the OneDrive folders, the SharePoint sites, and the Teams environment. You could use this as an alternate, as I said, turn the entire prior discussion on its end. If you've outsourced most of these operations now, you don't need a local Exchange server, and you don't need public folders, you don't need file servers, and you don't need all of these different on-premise server tools, and you've went to a SaaS-based solution, then this is an alternative to providing endpoint backup. It's an alternative to providing server-based backup in a lot of cases. If you've built user profiles on the servers, on the workstations, on the laptops that ensure that user data is not being stored anywhere but inside of the OneDrive environment, that file shares are all going up into SharePoint, all the communications happening through Teams, with sharing through Teams, then you can capture a lot of this through M365. Protect the domain and the various unique users, and ensure a very, very high level of protection. Now, you might want to think about both of these for customers. You're going to find a lot more hybrid environments where they've got some on-prem and a mixture of M365-based SaaS. And even in situations where you think they've got it all locked down and putting all user data into OneDrive, they can still sometimes find a way to get data onto the C drive or into the downloads directory and things like that. So there are benefits to overlapping M365, mailbox, OneDrive, SharePoint, and Teams protection alongside server and physical workstation protection. So the customer benefits here, we're going to let you safeguard that data that Microsoft really isn't safeguarding. It's increased security, it's data resiliency, it's especially for those mobile and remote workers. They don't have the same benefits of the various firewalls and security that you're going to have inside of the physical building, physical location. So coming at it from a cloud-based solution, you don't need a local on-premise backup appliance. You don't need NAS devices. It's a straight cloud-to-cloud solution, talking directly from Microsoft to the enabled cloud. No software to install on the local machine. You can help ensure business continuity and preparedness. If there is a data loss, they lose a piece of hardware, laptop dies, workstation dies, pull a new one, off the shelf and set it back up with M365, sync the data down, and they're back up and running. No need to restore data onto the system. It syncs from M365. The backup is there for corruption or compromise. By default, 7 years retention, multiple daily backup attempts across the various data sources. This is going to help you avoid paying for separate legal or regulatory compliance fees for archiving and retention. It does solve a gap in M365 by not having a native backup solution just yet. And there, once again, is no additional hardware or software to install in order to do this. We don't even have to put an agent on the local laptop because we're backing up from Microsoft's cloud into ours. You could use this to complement your existing M365 domain services if you're providing them to the clients. Perhaps you're managing their M365 user licenses, their Office licenses, coming in and doing their provisioning, remediation, the onboarding, the offboarding of users. Just bundle your data protection solutions right in with that. And then up or extend your price per user to account for your Cove backup licenses. Now, just to point out again here, the organization that you're supporting here, you or the organization you're supporting, is responsible for the backup recovery of the data. Microsoft is only responsible for making sure their infrastructure is available to the users. So they provide availability. You and your customers are the ones that are responsible for providing data protection. Services that we consider to be included in this offering would be, once again, you could adjust these based on your needs, but since it is a fairly turnkey solution without a lot of additional management or work here, there's not a lot of need for you to take things out or add things in. Services that would be included. As the MSP, you're going to enable M365 data protection at the domain level, set up a task during user mailbox provisioning in order to ensure that it gets added into the backup. This can be done very easily through an auto include option built into Cove. So as new users are showing up, they automatically get included unless you opt out of that feature. By ensuring automatic inclusion of licensed users in recurring backups, that's going to help you maintain protection without having to monitor or look at this on a daily basis. Although you still want to look at it and try to reconcile users at least on a monthly basis to remove users that are now unlicensed, expired, deleted, converted over to shared mailboxes to help stop billing for the upcoming or the following month. As there are failures or there are problems, unsuccessful backups, API errors, configuration errors, licensing errors, what have you, you will need to be regularly monitoring and remediating those. That's just a few minutes a day per domain. To address those, once again, it's mainly set it and forget it. If there is a problem, it's going to be more likely opening a help desk or support ticket with enable versus actually going in and doing much more than, say, deleting a corrupted email message or fixing a calendar item or triggering a restore of something that the user deleted or couldn't find. In the event that there is a major data loss, corruption, deletion, somebody accidentally deletes a user instead of converting them to shared, you may look at redirecting restores of deleted users or shared mailboxes as needed, or granular restore of select objects inside of a deleted mailbox or a OneDrive item or a SharePoint site that was damaged or corrupted. Teams and SharePoint data can be restored back to the original location or imported import is not the right word, reintroduced back into the environment for troubleshooting or to clone a site, stand up a secondary, things like that. As the MSP, you will want to provide some monthly reports around success, around failures, around remediation, open tickets, things of that nature. And you could optionally provide access to the IT staff as well to essentially monitor data protection. They could also be granted access to perform restores, although you do require global admin access in order to add, do a lot of the management and cleanup, and then to perform restores. So the less that they're messing around inside of the environment, the more likelihood you've got for successful restores and not having miscommunications around who's managing and who's enabling and configuring what. From a price point perspective, licensing is fairly simple on M365. We license it based on unique mailbox or a OneDrive user, or a licensed SharePoint user or a Teams owner. So it's unique mailbox. So if you're backing up their user mailbox, then you're going to get all those other functionalities, the OneDrive, the SharePoint, and the Teams capability at no additional cost per user. If you've only got one of the 4 services, you might as well turn on the other 3 and just take advantage of that extra level of protection. What we're proposing is around $9 a month per unique mailbox user as a price point. It's about a 35% gross margin. This doesn't include an RMM license like we do on the server or the workstation space because it's not needed. This is just Cloud API talking to Cloud API. It's a fairly good margin or good markup there on that $1.65 per user M365 license on our side. There are some out of scope items there. We publish a full list of items we don't protect inside of the M365 environment. Most importantly, I'll point out is we do not currently have a methodology or an API to be able to protect the online archive. So if you were looking for online archive, I would probably recommend MailAssure, another enable-based product in order to help supplement that offering. Although the nice thing about the online archive is if you start code backup before you enable the archive, we've already backed up all the data as it passed through the production mailbox. So only useful there if you've got a requirement for, say, a journaling mailbox. A couple other considerations here, assumptions and caveats. From a workload perspective, we're thinking here, it's probably 1.5 to 3 hours of work per month per protected domain. So not a ton of investment here. Like I said, it is fairly set it and forget it. Your domain sizes are going to vary anywhere from maybe 10 user domains to maybe 10 to 2,000 user mailboxes per mail domain environment. That initial provisioning might take you an hour if you're being very granular from a backup perspective on who you want to protect inside of an organization. But if you're doing a quick set it and forget it, backing up all users with an auto add, that could be done in just a couple minutes per domain. That's just initial onboarding. From an exceptions or a monitoring perspective, maybe 2 minutes per domain just to go through and look to see if there's a problem, where the problems are, dig in a little bit, make sure things are working the way as expected. That's nice, easy, quick, managed by exception, red, yellow, green color bars inside of the console. So you'll know without digging in whether you need to open up and look inside of a given domain. Remediation of errors, let's assume less than 10% of the domains are going to have any type of issue, so keeping it 90% at worst case, maybe 1 to 5 user issues, maybe 5 minutes per user per month there from a remediation perspective. Very, very small amount of time to work with this one. More frequently, like I said, probably opening a ticket with enable support around APIs, communications, throttling, issues that we have to address with Microsoft, not issues you'd address inside of the platform. And then finally, where your biggest amount of time is probably going to come into play is going to be the monthly license reconciliation against the M365 user list. As you move licensed users to unlicensed, as people leave the organization or fired or retire, then you do need to take actions on those historic backups. Do you retain them from a compliance perspective? In which case they remain billable? Do you convert them to shared and purge the OneDrive history so they become free shared mailboxes? Or do you restore that data to a alternate employee, to a manager or replacement for that individual so they've got access to that data and that information? It's going to vary by customer, vary by compliance requirements, vary by industry, but think about that when it is probably where you'll spend the most amount of your time, a mixture of onboarding and then a mixture of offboarding. Resource-wise, I do a boot camp on M365 where I go through Mail, OneDrive, SharePoint, and Teams, giving you the high-level overview, the caveats, walk you through a backup, walk you through the recoveries from a granular perspective and individual items and redirected restores. So grab the QR codes here, take a quick screenshot of those. Check that out right alongside the other resources that are available from the nerds and from our Enable University. And we can get you going with Cove Data Protection as a co-managed service very, very quickly.
Perfect.
Steph, I
Thank
think
you,
it's back to
Eric.
you.
Great job. I think I saw Lewis behind you. Is he back at his desk? Because he's on.
He looks like he is getting ready to step right into it.
Okay, I was a little worried. I'm
I'll,
like, Lewis, get to your desk.
I'll turn my camera off as he turns his on. How about that?
Perfect. Awesome. Thanks, Eric. All right, so we're going to move into our last. You saw there was a lot of different programs, but in the interest of time, we're just going to focus on kind of the big three. This last one is completely new to this boot camp. So if you have listened to this boot camp previously, we did not talk about managed detection response, but Enabled now has a fabulous managed detection response that I think is absolutely perfect for a co-managed model. So we built that into this particular boot camp. It has been added into the co-managed playbook. Once I get that, I will distribute to everyone so that you have all that information. But I'm going to pass it over to our head security nerd, Lewis Pope, who's going to give us all the details on how you can take our Enable MDR and make money off of it from a co-managed way. Thanks, Lewis.
Let's see if that's working now.
There
Is that
you go.
better?
We can hear you now. Yep, no problem. Thanks.
All right, there we go. All right. All right. So as earlier from Harless, thank you, Steph, for putting this all together, because if not, it would have been a lot more boring of a presentation. So now we're going to be talking about managed detection and response. We have our own MDR offering, which is response, but just so you can get a more descriptive idea of what it is, this is managed XDR. If we're going to be using some other industry terms that you're probably familiar with. And this is going to be a program where the MSP, you're going to go in and partner with an internal IT team so that you can give them their total knowledge, their full SIM to SOAR to SOC pipeline, where you're going to manage their threat detection, the initial triage and investigation and response to threats and to security events with just a turnkey solution for that internal IT team. You're just going to roll in, start ingesting all the information from all of their disparate systems and provide this MDR service for them. And it's going to be focused on monitoring security events and telemetry data from basically everything. Their their laptops, their desktops, their servers, workstations, the identity management platforms they may be using, from Intra ID, from their Google Workspace, from their firewall appliances, their IDSs and IPSs, anything in the environment that can produce a syslog. Those are going to be the things that you're going to be monitoring security events and for other events that need to be responded to. And your engagement there is going to be monitor these things, look for the events, respond to the events on behalf of that internal IT team up to a point at which it is now, you remediate up to a point and then you recommend additional guidance to them past that point. And this is needed simply because, hey, there's all kinds of reasons why an internal IT team would be looking to either offload because they can't keep up with it, or it might be a situation where they can't do this. Talent shortages are a real thing. They're affecting not just MSPs, but IT departments everywhere. It's not cheap to hire somebody that can take over and provide, true 24/7 SOC capabilities, because you're probably not hiring one person. It's going to be a team of people. So costs are prohibitively high just on the payroll side of things. Cyber threats are increasing. We're not just dealing with attacks from, international, transnational organized crime or nation-state-backed threat actors. We're dealing with attacks and defending against attacks from cybercrime gangs that are, started up simply because somebody had a couple of $1,000s and could buy their way into a ransomware as a service platform or into a access broker platform. It is now cheaper and faster to start up a ransomware cybercrime gang than it is to start up a legitimate MSP. Also, just quality and speed. It takes ongoing refinement to man and staff MDR detection and response capabilities, and also compliance, whether it's insurance applications, regulatory compliance, simple the pressures of other businesses insisting that you follow the same cybersecurity frameworks as they do in order to do business with them. There are tons and tons of pressures being applied to internal IT that is making them either forego advanced capabilities because there's not the budget for the payroll, or they're going to have to consume it some way externally, and that's where you have your opportunity. Next slide. So what are the benefits for an IT department to consume an MDR offering from you? Well, it's going to help them reduce their cyber risk. You're going to be taking out a lot of their challenges for them and automating a ton of processes for them so that, well, hey, they can refocus. They can go focus on the other things that they like to do and things that might be more meaningful for them to improve the business productivity. Also, it's a part of business continuity. If they suffer from a cyber attack, having a lot of the investigative work, a lot of the log collection work and aggregation work and analysis work being offloaded to an external team can free up the internal team to kind of, keep things running, keep things in operation. Also, making sure that you have the ability to prove out that things are being done as they should be done. With an MDR offering, that internal IT team can, they don't have to worry about hunting down the individuals that don't have multi-factor authentication enabled. They don't have to worry about hunting down the over-permissive file shares that might be set up in the environment. That's being offloaded to you and the Enable MDR offering. They also get the transparency and the visibility. A lot of outsourced SOC solutions, which are not the totality of the full MDR that we're offering, but just as an example, a SOC service, you may have to put in a request for information or put in requests for documentation, and you may have to wait days to get those responses. With Enable's MDR, you have full access to the same platform that you as the MSP is going to use if you want to provide it to them. That's going to cut down on their time between needing to know something and being able to find out about it, but it also can help you reduce your overhead, your management overhead. So you're not having to fetch and find data for them. They can simply access it in a transparent dashboard. Also, there's always going to be the challenge whenever you go into a co-managed opportunity. What tools are they using? What endpoint security solution are they using? What brand of firewall appliances are they using? Does your team know how to work with those? Do they know what is useful information whenever it comes to looking at the logs for those devices? With Enable's MDR, you're able to consolidate whatever they may have into a centralized platform and not have to worry about, how are we standardizing this data? Where are we storing this data? How are we going to make it parsable and searchable? That's all taken care of by the platform. So the abstraction of all of the complexity and all of the different types of sources of that data becomes simply an action of going into the Enable MDR platform, writing a single KQL query, and looking across the entire estate to find whatever needs to be found. And again, regardless of where that information was coming from and how you got that information in the first place. Also, it's expensive to hire the individuals to manage something like this. Even if you weren't shooting for, full SOC operations, like a full team with tier 1s, tier 2s, tier 3s internally for an internal IT team, you still are going to have somebody on the clock 24/7 watching the dashboards, monitoring for alerts. And that's 8,470 hours roughly of payroll a year just for one set of eyes to be around 24/7. That's probably the cost of the MDR service that you're going to be selling some of these in some of these co-managed opportunities. So it can simply be an exercise of saying or making the pitch to the co-managed opportunity that you can hire somebody internally and you can use these tools, and it'll cost you the tools plus the person's payroll, or you can just purchase the service from us, and that's going to be cheaper by sometimes even half. The services you're actually going to be including in a managed detection and response service offering whenever you're leveraging Enable's MDR to deliver it. One of the things is going to be cybersecurity assessments and continual updating of the baseline of an environment, kind of the overall health. You're able to, at a glance in the dashboard, see what the overall health of an environment is. You're able to quickly and easily track down things that need to be remediated, such as over permissive file shares in the environment. If it's as much as things are a challenge sometimes, you would think that something as simple as, do we know that if anybody set up any file shares in the environment with everyone as the permissions on the file or on the file share? That is something that takes time and effort and skills to go figure out. This is just something that is surfaced in the platform for you. And that could be something that is in scope of what you're offering as a service to go remediate that, or it could be where your playbook and your rules of engagement says that you just notify the client of that. Incident response plans and incident response playbooks. When you're going through the onboarding process to set somebody up for an MDR offering, you're going to have to define the rules of engagement. What do we do in response to these situations? Who do we call? How far do you want us to carry the remediation and automate actions before we contact the internal IT and let them know that there's a configuration in the environment that needs to be corrected to mitigate a threat that we just uncovered. Also, you're going to need to do an MDR offering, you need a SIM, and that's probably actually the first thing that you are going to be dealing with Enable MDR is handling the SIM component. But a SIM needs to be there because that's going to allow you to ingest data from all of your different sources, wherever they are, internally, the cloud, user identity management platforms, whatever it may be, and getting it in one location and storing it without having to worry about ingestion costs, processing costs. It's with the platform. And that's a very nice thing about Enable MDR. One of the things that can absolutely bite you whenever you're dealing with a SIM, especially a SaaS-based SIM, is being charged more one month versus the other, simply because there was more data being generated in the environment, and there was more traffic and more bandwidth consumption happening. With Enable MDR, that's not a concern because we're not going to charge you more for those higher ingestions. Then all of this stuff is also going to need to be backed up by actual, honest to goodness, 24/7 real-time monitoring. It is one of those things that you will commonly see. Some MSPs will say we offer 24/7 monitoring services. And it's like, yeah, they're offering 24/7 monitoring through automation in their platforms, but there's simply just somebody on call after hours. In today's threat landscape, that's getting to a point where that's just simply not good enough. You need somebody on, 24/7, eyes on screens, hands on keyboards, because let's think of the situation. You've set up an MDR offering, but you don't have somebody on 24/7 monitoring it. They're just on call. Well, the alert goes out. They get their phone buzzes. It's 3 a.m. in the morning. They've got to, become conscious enough to deal with it. They have to go to the computer. They have to sit down. They have to get into the ticketing system. They have to start familiarizing themselves with the situation, what's happening, what's going on, and start taking some actions. That's something that could take, 10 minutes, or it could be something that takes an hour. But whenever you're doing it this way, it's giving you that opportunity for something to go sideways. Seconds count, and something like a foreign VPN access failure because somebody fails an MFA challenge could be the early indicator that lets you know that you should rotate a user's credentials or lock down a user. And if you can do that quickly enough, that will prevent that potential threat actor from actually gaining access to an environment if you didn't get to it for 30 or 40 minutes. Also, AI and machine learning, you're going to need to employ something like that to deal with modern threats, whatever tool set you find. It can't simply be that you're going to use a solution that you can add new definitions to on a recurring basis. Threats can easily, polymorphic threats, living off the land attacks. There's all kinds of ways for modern threats to defeat that approach. So Enable MDR uses not just AI and machine learning backed user behavioral analytics on all of the data it is ingesting. They have live data scientists that are writing new rules based on Yara and Sigma rules and STIX IOCs that are being produced to conduct threat hunting activities on top of the simple alerting. Honeypots. You're going to need honeypots deployed in an environment to detect unusual behavior. Without honeypots, it's really hard to find new unusual behavior, or at least it's not as easy to find new unusual environment in an environment. If you have a honeypot VM and your DMZ, none of your normal users are ever going to be interacting with it. So there should not be a lot of traffic on it. Therefore, whenever things do happen on that honeypot, file directories get populated or somebody scans it. That's a clear indicator of somebody poking around where they shouldn't. Also, nowadays you're going to need darknet monitoring of credential leaks, because it's just another simple way of getting ahead of a potential threat actor pivoting into an environment. With Enable MDR, we're giving you that as a feature in the platform. There's no additional licensing associated with it, but it's not just the monitoring of it. This is one of the first kind of SOAR actions that you can initiate inside of Enable MDR. So whenever that darknet exposure hit happens, set of compromised credentials for sale on a dark website somewhere, you can automatically take that information about those compromised credentials, go to that user in the domain, and either have that user reset their password on the next login, or even more aggressively, we can have it so it kicks that user out of all their current sessions, or even disables that user in the environment as an automatic action. Perimeter defense as well. You're offering an MDR service. You need to monitor everything everywhere. So it doesn't matter if it's in the cloud, on premise, you need to be monitoring, looking for configuration changes. If there are open ports with services running behind them with known vulnerabilities. These are some of the core items you're going to need in an Enable MD in an MDR offering, and Enable MDR brings all of those to you in one streamlined platform. First line response. So with Enable MDR, this is great because the initial detection, investigation, triage, and remediation is handled by the service whenever threats are detected. And after those threats and events are detected, they can be actioned on either as a SOAR action, so an automated action, or it can be something that the SOC team engages with and performs additional threat intelligence gathering, some additional threat hunting, better understand the situation and take further actions if needed. Do they need to reach out in the environment and shut down a device or disconnect a device from the environment? Do they need to reach down into the local domain and disable a user there? That's what comes with the Enable MDR offering with the managed detection and response engagement of the SOC. Also, give them dashboard access. If you're going to be doing a co-managed engagement, again, you don't want to have to spend time just sending reports back and forth if you don't have to, sending back individual metrics. If they're curious about the state of a system in the environment, why make them have to ask you for it? You can provide that to them directly, and you can even put in, rule-based access controls, and you can set it up so if you can give them audit-only views, you can give them report-only views if you need to. And that access with all of those live metrics improves transparency, and you don't get into so many of those, well, what value are you delivering? What are you actually doing for me? The proof is there. They are seeing the results in the platform. They will see the total alerts. They'll see how many alerts get raised into actual incidents that need to be investigated. That'll all be plainly easily available for them. And then also, of course, monthly reviews or quarterly reviews, however, is going to best match how you're engaging with the co-managed op. But monthly is probably better because, well, the more often you can stay engaged with them, the more often you can remind them of the value of the service you're delivering. And then data retention. Is always going to be something that is contingent upon the industry or the vertical that the company operates in. Some will be fine with 90 days of retention. Others will be required to have 365 days of data retention. But typically, the longer you can retain that data, the better, because that's going to allow you to look back in time and investigate when things happen. When did that configuration change in the firewall appliance occur? Who initiated it? That's going to be valuable information for you. Also, whenever you're offering out managed detection and response, it's worth going the extra step into compliance services as well, because you're laying a whole lot of the groundwork with Enable MDR. You're going to get your SIM, you're going to have your SIM functionality, so you have all of your security log information, security event information, your security events, notifications and log information, your configuration changes from your firewall. All that information is going to be brought into one centralized location by the SIM functionality. And since it's all there, it's now one-touch reporting. You don't have to go pull logs from 5 different systems, put them somewhere, and then find a way to parse and correlate that data. It's already been done for you by the platform. It's simply choose the report that you need to generate, whether it's an executive summary report, a multi-factor authentication enablement report, a object manipulation report, whatever it may be. Also with this, inside of Enable MDR, first, we have the raw data. We have all of that available for compliance and audit purposes. But then there is also compliance reporting that is for the business side of compliance, for the, are you doing these things? Do you have these processes and procedures implemented? Do you have these business protocols? You have specific users or officers assigned to these specific roles. Inside of an Enable MDR, there are guided report generators in there for PCI DSS, for some NIST, for some HIPAA compliance and high trust, which you can use to go through and perform those assessments. So you can find those gaps in coverage, find those things that internal IT department may have missed, may not have known they needed to do in relation to a specific compliance. And there's other items in Enable MDR that help reinforce that, such as the policy monitoring to see if there are any configurations, in the GPO that are contrary to what something like PCI might ask for. And this is something that, since you have transparency on the platform and you can provide access to the co-managed IT department, they can simply do it themselves. They might be skilled enough and so inclined. They can work through the process of doing the report themselves, or if they get halfway through it and they get frustrated because they can't answer it or they don't know what the answer should be, they can engage you and you can come and finish it for them, or you can simply offer that as part of the service that you're offering. that you will perform these audits, perform these assessments, but that may or may not be in scope of your core MDR offering, but it's an option. So really quickly, there's so much to the Enable MDR platform. It's kind of hard to squeeze it all in a short little session here, but I think this pipeline of capabilities here is going to kind of demonstrate what you can do with Enable MDR. First is that collection. You need to collect the syslog information, the event information from all these different types of sources. That is a challenge in and of itself, and that could potentially represent the cost of an engagement. That could be the worth of the entire engagement for some internal IT departments. That be simply because it might take them days or weeks to get all of this information from all of these different systems flowing into one location. And then once it's all flowing into that one location, it's being ingested and aggregated and stored somewhere. Well, you just solved some infrastructure problems for them. They don't have to keep a server with enough storage to keep these needed logs around for long enough. And then once it's in there, well, you're offloading the enrichment. They don't have to do the research. They don't have to look at the current threat intelligence feeds. They don't have to find what the current, whatever the YARA or STIX is for the most recent threat or the indicators of compromise. That's all built into the platform for you. And then there's the live element of the service where, okay, all of this information is in here. It's been enriched by automation. It's been enriched by threat intelligence feed. Now the human SOC is looking at it. Are there alerts and notifications in here that are going to take us further investigating into some lateral movement that might need to have a response? So whether it's because the automation of the platform flags something, or the SOAR actions or the threat hunters tag something, the responses can be automated for a lot of things with the SOAR actions. That's disabling accounts, resetting credentials, kicking users out of their current sessions, or it could be more hands-on remediations that the SOC will carry out, such as reaching out down to a system and isolating it on the network, or rebooting it or powering it off because they saw lateral movement from that device. And even down into some system patching and auto blocking of certain policies, going down into a system and initiating an action for you. But the great thing there is, of course, there's rule book, there's going to be playbooks and incident response books that are going to define all of that. And then you get the reporting out of it in the end, which is going to be your compliance reporting, but also your audit reporting. So whenever something does happen and you get asked the question of, well, what users logged into this system over this time period, you can easily produce that in 4 clicks in 30 seconds. It's not something of, well, let me find somebody to go log into that machine, try to pull the logs, look for specific event IDs. It's just like, nope, you go into the platform, you look for, and it will spit the report out for you. So pricing on MDR services, there is going to be a spectrum of possibilities here, but it would not be unusual to see an MDR program fetching more than just a few dollars per endpoint. This is something where you can be looking at opportunities to charge 60% margin or more and start earning, somewhere around $80 per head, $90 per head or more. And that's going to include your cost of, if you're using Enable MDR, you're going to be including the cost of that RMM agent. So again, so you have that foothold in the environment for future options and some other things. Highly recommend the EDR control agent in these situations. So even if you have MDR, you still need endpoint protection on the endpoints. This is not a replacement for that. It's simply an additional security control and an additional service. 365 days of retention, and then whatever labor you're going to factor in to perform additional remediations and additional engagements up to a point, depending on what your agreed upon playbooks and rules of engagement with the client are going to be. There will be some systems and some environments where there is going to be a certain set of actions that you're not going to be able to take. You just define that out front and you adjust your pricing in response to it. Of course, there's going to be stuff that's going to need to be out of scope. So creations of like custom detections are usually out of scope here. Unless you're on like an additional, an engagement for them, you have a client that's in a highly regulated environment, or it's a client that is concerned about intellectual property, or they are actually a legitimate target for threats. You may have to do a little bit extra for them. Email and browser security. So that's going to be a thing that is, while you may be able to ingest alerts from an email security solution, you may be able to ingest alerts from a DNS filtering solution or a content filtering solution. They themselves there are different tools and different costs associated with them. They'll be out of scope, but ingesting the event information for them should be in scope. Incident responses that go outside of the defined remediations and mitigations that are defined in your incident response playbooks and your rules of engagement. So the going above and beyond, that's going to be time and material charges or project charges. And also vulnerability management and penetration testing. So with any type of MDR service, it is kind of in the name, it's detection and response. And vulnerability management is typically outside of the scope of that, but that doesn't mean you cannot use MDR to reinforce vulnerability management. Simply in the sense of the ability of the MDR platform to point out to you that you do have risky file shares, or you have devices that are at risk because of permissions. Next slide. There. So there's going to be definitely, again, the in scope and out of scope. And you're really going to want to rely on a few things to kind of define that and really keep that tight, because with MDR, since you are looking globally across the entire estate and anything and everything that the client has, that co-managed IT department is taking care of, you've got the opportunity to get deep into the weeds on a lot of things really fast if you don't scope well. So first is going to be your SOAR automations. You're going to want to make sure that the security orchestration and automated responses, so the things such as whenever you have a user who logs in from a foreign IP address or foreign country IP, and they are trying to log into the VPN appliance, do we want to have that as a action that is automatically responded to and that user gets disabled? Do we want it to be that whenever a user fails their multi-factor authentication step, whenever they're trying to log into 365, do we want an automated response to be initiated because of that? And then there'll be the human intervention. So beyond the automatic responses, there's the scoping of, well, what are we going to do in response? There's going to be what the SOC team, so when enable MDR, the SOC engagement there is going to be doing a lot. But then it's the question of, well, they're going to neutralize a breach, so they might shut down a user, they may shut down an endpoint, they may shut down a group of systems, and then they'll provide you with the information of what happened, what went down, which systems were affected, and give you some addition, and then you can provide that to the co-managed IT department to say, hey, this is what went down, this was touched, these are the things that were missed, here are the obvious gaps. Are these things that we can change and configure that are kind of like in scope of the service? Or are these things that are like, oh no, we're going to have to completely rebuild some systems, we're going to have to completely overhaul how the security groups are set up in the domain? Those would be kind of most likely out of scope items. And the actual, provide those recommendations, but the actual act of fixing them, that's where you're passing it off either to the internal IT department for them to do, or giving them the opportunity to say, hey, can you take care of it for us on a project? And what you're going to be considering on that incident response really has to be nailed down, because again, you can find yourself having to deal with the totality of a situation because your client, the client organization just has expectations of, well, we offloaded this to you, therefore you are handling everything associated with it. So to help you out with this, we do have some resources available. We have in the co-managed playbook, there's an MDR statement of work that you can get. There's also boot camps that I'm doing once a month right now, actually multiple times a month. There's a SIM/SOC SOAR compliance boot camp where we're going over, the challenges of staffing and technologies and skills that keep you from being able to build this up from scratch within a day, but how Enable MDR can help you get a client and get an environment onboarded sometimes in less than 90 minutes. Also, there's the Accelerate Your Growth with Enable MDR bootcamp. We also have another one coming up, which will be me and Steph will be doing on how to appropriately price your MDR services. There's also the daily MDR demos that are available that you can go find. And again, the co-managed playbook, take advantage of it.
When it comes out, still waiting on it.
Yes.
All right, perfect. Yeah. So thank you, Lewis. Again, I think you can tell between Lewis and myself, we're very, very excited around our new Enable MDR and the value that it can bring to your managed services business, and how easy it's going to be able to get out there and sell it, especially as a co-managed offering. So just to kind of start wrapping things up, I appreciate everybody's time. We've been talking about co-managed for 20 years. I remember when I started 20 years ago, we called it supplemental IT. We had a fictitious MSP that we called Prime Assist back then. So I feel like I've been talking about this for many, many years, but it is, I think, still relatively new to the managed services space. But I think it's a great, viable market opportunity that I love seeing everybody, either pursuing it or thinking of pursuing it. Just a quote here from one of our super elite partners, John Joyce. He is the owner of CRSTC out of Florida. He has been successfully delivering the co-managed model for several years, and he really credits it to really helping him grow and expand his business beyond the traditional managed services market that he had been traditionally targeting. And he's really focused on, or the success has really come from leveraging his N-Central. He's an N-Central partner, and his foot in the door program, or his entry level program, was patch. So N-Central plus his patch management. And what he's recognized over the years is that once he was able to get N-Central in there, get everything baseline, get it configured correctly for the patch management services, it then became very easy to go and then bolt on other services from there. And it would usually be Cove, which is what we heard Eric talk about, or something from a security perspective, either EDR, or now that we have MDR. And so he would actually kind of position those sales opportunities by saying to the internal IT director during one of their monthly meetings, look, we have patch in place, it's working well, it's taking care of the essentials for you, but we now need to be building on top of that. And we should really look at implementing some higher level security services so that we can improve kind of your overall security protection levels. And then that would open the door for him to tack on Cove, tack on EDR. He's now going to be starting to promote the MDR here. So it's just kind of a case in point of why it is so important that we start with the RMM. We get the RMM as a central item as any co-managed offering that you go to market, and then leading with something like patch has been really beneficial in getting kind of the co-managed opportunity, that line of business off the ground, and then expanding it from there. So just one more thing that I do want to bring up, I'll be quick, I promise, because there might be opportunities where the co-managed model or the products that you're offering via your co-managed services might not be a good fit for the prospects that you're speaking to. So it's something that we have that we don't really talk about too much, but Enable does have a reseller program. And it is a wonderful program for MSPs to consider because it kind of gives you the opportunity to jump in and resell any of the Enable products to your customers, and then use that as a passive income stream that, you know, maybe you can invest somewhere back into your business, maybe into sales and marketing. But the idea behind the Enable reseller program is to address maybe that objection, or maybe it's a request or a comment that you may get from an internal IT department that says, you know what, we don't really need your team, we don't need your services, but we could really use some better tool sets, but we just haven't found the time to investigate and evaluate what maybe some of those tool sets should be. And so this is a program where you can actually resell maybe Enable Zen Central, the Insight, Cove, MDR, to customers that are kind of giving you this comment or requesting this need. And your customers, the way it works is they would purchase the products from you, and then they would use the products within their own business, but then they would have access to all of our training resources. They would have access to our support team. So there's no strain on you or your team where you have to support them. It's strictly you reselling the tech tools, and then you can delegate all of the training and the support over to Enable. And so the way the billing works is that we bill you for the licenses, you know, however many the customer has purchased, but then we sell those licenses to you at a prescribed discount from, you know, we have a kind of a discounting structure that's all built into the program, but then you go and you mark it up so that it matches what our MSRP pricing is. And then in effect, your commission is kind of that difference between the two. And that commission is kind of your thank you for being a referral source for Enable. And then if you would like to kind of extend this, add on some additional value, you could tack on your own professional services. You could help them with the onboarding, the setup, the configuration, the optimization best practices if you want to move it beyond just the resale of the technology tools. But the main benefit here that you want to promote to your internal IT department is that, you know, you've already done all the heavy lifting, right? You've already evaluated the tool sets out in the market. You selected the best vendors, the best technology tools that are out there in the market. These are actual tools that you use to support your entire managed services line of business. So you trust those tool sets. And so you can save that internal IT team time from having to go through their own lengthy evaluation process. And you can really say, you can be confident in the performance, the reliability, the quality and usability of the tool sets, because we use them to support our, you know, hundreds of MSP clients. The other benefit is that a lot of the top tool sets that internal IT team could benefit from aren't actually available for them to purchase because a lot of the good vendors, they're channel only. So it doesn't make their tool sets really available to them to purchase in the enterprise space. So this is, again, where you can provide access to your top tools that maybe the internal IT team wouldn't necessarily ever get access to if they didn't partner with an MSP who has access to their tool sets themselves. So there's a lot that goes into the program, but I just wanted to bring it up as an alternative. If you hear that, yeah, I don't need your team, but kind of interested in your tool sets, feel free to reach out to me, reach out to your partner success manager if you have further questions around that, and we can get into all the particulars of the actual program. All right, so just some final thoughts. You know, if you're thinking about what to do next, there was so much information I know that was given in this boot camp. We appreciate your time and sticking it out with us. It will be available, uploaded into Enable U shortly. I'll give it a couple of weeks, but if you're looking to listen to it again, just send me an email or put it in the question panel and I will get that sent over to you. Part 2 is coming up, as I said, next week. We didn't even touch on how do you go to market, you know, how do I sell this? How do I promote this? That's going to be next week's boot camp there. The co-managed digital playbook I will send out to everyone as soon as I get it. I'm hoping I will have it for next week's boot camp, but stay tuned for that. But if you generally have questions on anything that we've been talking about here, work with your partner success manager or join one of our office hours. Every month, Lewis, Eric and I offer office hours that we can take your code questions, your security questions, your how do I go to market questions. And I meant to say that. So thank you very much, everyone. Just one more poll that I kind of want to launch, because again, I think this is really only the third time that we've delivered this. I know it was pretty long, so I don't know how we can kind of cut that down, but the idea was co-managed market is a great viable market for your MSP, and we're hoping that you guys can get the same success that we're seeing other MSPs get. And so we wanted to provide really kind of a roadmap and try and be as prescriptive as possible in what do you actually build, how do you actually price it, how do you go to market with that. So if there was something that you were looking to hear today that maybe we didn't talk about, let us know. If there was some confusion or some questions. Again, all that feedback is absolutely appreciated so that we can get that incorporated into the next iteration of the boot camp. Okay. And then, as I said, as we're talking about, if you wanted to register for next week's boot camp, the QR code is there. Along if you wanted to check out any of the other boot camps that, Lewis was talking about with the MDR, Eric has boot camps coming up around Cove. So that QR code will get you access so that you can register for any of those that look interesting to you. And I think it's built out for the summer now. So you can pretty much get your summer training lined up between now and the end of September or end of August maybe. And then one last boot camp or one last webinar that I like to promote is taking place next week. And this is really around, how to use security as a catalyst to drive revenue. This is a web event that's taking place between Enable and SentinelOne. Really, again, talking about how can you monetize this green field that still exists as it relates to security. So if that's something that you're interested in, QR code there to register for that one as well. All right, so thank you everyone for hanging in with us as we talked about co-managed services today. Absolutely appreciated your time. You can see our contact information is there on the screen. If you have any questions, never hesitate to reach out, and hopefully we'll see you on a future boot camp. Enjoy the rest of your day, everyone. Have a good week. Thanks. Bye.